Heat Seekers, I'm back with your week 3 wide receiver tiers. We've got some shakeups going on, some guys that have outperformed what we expected, and a lot of guys that have performed well under what we expect. Let's get right into the rankings. Tier 1 in week 3, 6 guys that you would expect to be in this tier, or at least close to it. Tyreek Hill was in tier 2 last week. He moves up to tier 1. We obviously didn't see the performances from Chase and Adams and Jefferson that we want to see from them in week 2, but we have no concerns going forward. We know that they're going to consistently be good. There are going to be those weeks like last week. It was just weird seeing all of them have an off week in the same week. Obviously, Stefon Diggs, quarterback, might be the MVP of the NFL this year. He started off real good in 2 weeks. Kupp doing Kupp things. And then Tyreek Hill, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns in that comeback versus the Ravens. Tier 1, these guys are studs. Going to tier 2, A.J. Brown kind of fits in that same mold that we talked about. Didn't have the big week 2 that we were hoping for. Obviously, week 1 had those 13 targets. He's going to be heavily involved in this Eagles offense. So we're not concerned about him long term, even though week 2 wasn't what we wanted. He's right there on the brink of being tier 1, but he is at the top of tier 2. Deebo, also kind of a down week. We expect him to get on the same page with Jimmy Garoppolo like they've been in the past, like we saw last year when Deebo was just exceptional when it came to fantasy. But the big name in this tier is Amon-Ra St. Brown. We had concerns that with everybody healthy, maybe he wouldn't see the targets, but he has become the first wide receiver in NFL history to have 8 catches in 8 straight games. The guy's for real. I wasn't high on him when he came into the league, but he's proven me wrong, and he deserves this spot in tier 2. And quite frankly, it's not crazy if we had him in tier 1. This is also the return of Mike Thomas to tier 2. He's had a touchdown, at least a touchdown in each of the first 2 weeks, and looks like the Michael Thomas of old that we were used to prior to the last 2 seasons that were filled with injuries. Jaylen Waddle, Tyreek Hill has not hurt his production. Obviously, not every game is going to be like week 2 where they've got to come back from a huge deficit and they're chucking the ball up. But Jaylen Waddle is a good football player, and he is going to be heavily targeted in this offense despite the presence of Tyreek Hill. It's them too, right? That's the passing funnel is to those 2 wide receivers. Going to be very productive, and every week is a startable fantasy asset despite the fact that one of the best receivers in the league has joined this team. Moving to tier 3, at the top of this tier, it's the guy that everybody was laughing at in the offseason, Christian Kirk, with that $21 million contract per year. Everybody thought it was a joke, but he has done nothing but produce in his first 2 games with the Jaguars. Him and Trevor Lawrence have a really good connection, and he is going to continue to be heavily targeted in this offense, and that makes him a wide receiver 2 easily in fantasy right now. Obviously, in this tier, we hope to see Keenan Allen back this week. And we have the return of Curtis Samuel to the tier rankings. Obviously, week 1, we saw a really good game from Curtis Samuel, and we had seen those in the past. So for me, myself, I wanted to see it a little bit more. And it is quite evident that the Washington Commanders are going to utilize Curtis Samuel in multiple ways throughout the season. He is going to be fantasy relevant as long as he stays healthy. So if he's healthy, we put him in our lineups. A back-end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, potential for more. It's crazy, though, because we see 3 wide receivers from this team on the tiers. And if they have to continue throwing the way that they have in the beginning of the season, and Carson Wentz can keep producing these fantasy productive days for these wide receivers, it's going to be a fun season for people that have Washington Commanders on their roster. The other 2 guys here at the bottom of this tier, Jakobi Meyers just keeps producing for New England. He had fallen big time after last season, and nobody really knew why. The fantasy community just wasn't loving him, but he has produced the first 2 weeks. He moves into tier 3, and then we see rookie Garrett Wilson. Everybody was wondering, is it going to be Elijah Moore? Is it going to be Garrett Wilson? The team was telling us it might be Corey Davis, and we've seen production from Davis and Wilson the first 2 weeks. I do expect Wilson to continue to grow and be the guy in this offense. And I do think that Elijah Moore is going to become more productive as the season goes on. Garrett Wilson in the tier 3 with them 2 touchdowns last week in that comeback that the Jets had. Love to see it here. He was my wide receiver 1 in this rookie class. Moving down into tier 4, DK Metcalf is at the top of this. Obviously, we haven't seen the production so far this year. He is going to continue to get targets, though, and I do expect better days to come in this offense, even with Geno Smith at quarterback. But we need to see more consistency from DK. He would be in tier 5, but we do know that we have that huge weak potential with DK, which puts him into that tier 4 for me because he could score 35 points this week. Most of the guys down in tier 4 or tier 5, we're not going to see that type of production with. A lot of the guys here in tier 4, we're not going to see that type of production with. So it's going to be inconsistent, but there are going to be some spike weeks. And hopefully we get more consistency as the season progresses. Amari Cooper, was worried about him earlier in the year. Still not convinced. It's the same thing with DK that we're going to see it consistently. But a big week in week 2 showed that he can have productive weeks with Brissett. But we want to see more consistency from him as well. CeeDee Lamb, quarterback situation, didn't see huge production in week 2. It was all right. There was at least a floor there for us. We haven't seen a ceiling from Lamb, and we need to. But right now, he's in that same situation with Metcalf and Cooper, where the quarterback play is probably holding them back a little bit. But, you know, there's still starts. There's still starts in fantasy at minimum at the flex position. We saw some production from Allen Robinson. Should have had 2 touchdowns, but one got called back because of a weird rule, and it was whistled dead like midway through the play when he was wide open. So would have had his second touchdown there, but still 15 fantasy points this week. That's what we like to see, and we expect him to get integrated more and more into this offense as the season progresses. But for week 3, he is a tier 4 guy. DJ Moore is in the same situation as the guys at the top of this tier. Is Baker going to be able to make him super fantasy relevant? He did have 13 points, I think, in week 2, but we want to see more consistency there in that quarterback play and in the production for DJ Moore. Drake London, another rookie, been really good so far, but I don't trust Atlanta's offense to produce consistently at this point, and that's the only reason why he's here in 4. And I do expect Kyle Pitts to get more involved. He's been pretty MIA so far in the first 2 weeks, so I do expect that usage for Kyle Pitts to grow, which may take a little bit away from Drake London on the ceiling side. At the bottom of this tier is Russell Gage. Mike Evans is out. We don't know about Julio. Chris Godwin's probably out. It looks like Gage may be the number 1 or the 1A to 1B to Rashod Bateman in this week, and Scotty Miller's going to be an option this week, and if all those guys miss. But Russell Gage is the one that I trust the most. I've seen him produce as the number 1 in Atlanta just last year, and expect him to be the guy that Tom Brady relies on in this offense against Green Bay this week, which isn't a great matchup. But I do think Russell Gage is a must flex wide receiver if all those wide receivers end up being out. Even if Julio's the only one in, he's probably still a flex start for me here in week 3. In this bottom tier, we see a bunch of guys that are just going to be inconsistent. There's going to be some boom weeks. Tyler Lockett, how consistent is he going to be? Darnell Mooney has yet to be incorporated in the Bears offense. I fully expect him to get back up into this tier 2, tier 3 range. The Bears have only thrown the ball 28 times in 2 games. That is just, it's ludicrous. Obviously, there was the rain game, and then they only threw 11 times in the Packers game. That will change, and his usage will go up. But right now, it's hard to trust this offense, but they do get a better matchup here than their first 2 weeks that were both against probably top 5 defenses with Houston. Then Corey Davis is consistently getting targeted with Elijah Moore. That's also in this tier. I do think they are behind Garrett Wilson, though, in the pecking order and in skill just in general. So that's why they're tier 5 guys. Chris Olave, 13 targets in week 2. That's what we want to see out of our rookies. We just want them to get some production with that. So he's a guy that could definitely be moving up. And Kurt Jarvis Landry, that's also in this tier, because I do expect Olave to be a big part of this Saints offense. DeVonta Smith got involved this week, a little more than week 1. So we like to see that. Allen Lazard, I don't know that he's going to be the number 1. We did see him get a touchdown in week 2, but it's not like he was out there consistently getting open against the Chicago Bears. Tampa Bay is probably a better defense than the Chicago Bears. I don't know that I trust Lazard on a week-to-week basis, but definitely is a guy that could move into tier 4, high-end tier 4, and potentially low tier 3 in the future. All right, Heat Seekers, that is your week 3 wide receiver tier video. Let me know what you think. think. Tell me what I'm wrong about down in the comments. And make sure you go over to rotoheat.com and check out the article that I will update if we get late week news on any of these players so that you're up to date, because this is Wednesday and a lot of stuff can come out like last week on Thursday, Friday, Saturday that changes these rankings. And you can watch the running back, quarterback, tight end videos here on the channel. So hit like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell and check out the playlist right here.